Welcome to the Unleashed Basics training video. Let's have a look at what this video will cover. We'll talk about the Unleashed workflow. We'll then talk about purchasing and how to create a purchase order and add purchase costs. We'll then have a look at sales, which includes creating a quote, creating a sales order, shipping and completing of that order, credits, and some basic sales reporting. So first, the Unleashed workflow. Unleashed takes care of your inventory management needs from end to end. This starts at purchasing to bring goods into your business, which then becomes your stock on hand. Stock can then also be returned to your suppliers. Once you have stock on hand, it is important to keep accurate stock on hand figures, and Unleashed has tools to help you with this. You can also use Unleashed for light manufacturing, where it allows you to build products from raw components. Sales are also conducted in Unleashed. You will know exactly how much stock on hand you have to sell to your clients. With completed transactions in Unleashed, transactions can then be passed to your accounting software to keep your finances up to date. Let's take a closer look at how purchasing is handled in the system. For this basic lesson, we will cover the following with regards to purchasing: creating and importing products and supplier records, creating and sending purchase orders, adding purchase costs, receipting purchases, supplier returns, and the reorder report. When you log into Unleashed, you will be presented with the dashboard. This dashboard has some great, useful information to help you run your business. We will take a closer look at this dashboard as we cover the various topics. The navigation is nice and simple, with the menu running on the left-hand side of the page. There are also some quick links accessible from the top of the page, and access to tasks, notifications, and a few other options on the top right-hand side of the page. Before you can start creating a purchase order, you need to ensure that your products and suppliers are loaded. You can either do this manually or using the import-export options, where Unleashed will provide you with templates. To create a purchase order, you can either use the quick link at the top of the page, so that's Add Purchase, or you can use the Purchases option on the menu on the left-hand side. So we can select Purchases, Purchase Orders, and Add Purchase. This will display a new purchase order. The first thing you need to do is enter the supplier, and you can do this by using the supplier code, the supplier name, or using the advanced search. For this example, I'm going to select one of my suppliers called Aurora Trading. The next step would be to insert a supplier reference where necessary. You can also enter the discount, the supplier invoice date. I'm just going to leave it at today's date. You can then select a tax rate from the drop-down, and also select the warehouse which the goods will be shipped to. Depending on which warehouse you select, the delivery name and details of that warehouse will populate accordingly. Further to the right, you'll see the order date. You can then also specify the delivery date, and this is quite important because if the goods don't arrive by that date, it will show up as a late purchase in the system. Unleashed will create a PDF for you, and you can set up your templates to suit your business requirements. You can then go down and add the product. This can be the SKU, the description, or even a barcode. So for this example, I've selected my American Pale Ale product. Then you can add the quantity that you would like to purchase. You can then enter the price, and for this example, it has actually pulled through the price that I have set up as part of my product's import. This, however, can be changed. You can then also see the availability displayed, which gives you an indication of how many products are available to sell. There's also a comments field, so you can enter any comments where relevant, and then once done with that line, you can click on the Add button. I'm just going to add a few more products for this example. So again, enter my product description, quantities, make sure the price is correct, and add comments where you see fit. Then click on Add. At this point, we can place our purchase order in the parked status, which is basically a draft status. The bottom of this purchase order will display the total volume and total weight, which is perfect for calculating shipping costs. You can also see payment terms and the currency code. To the right, you will see an item count, subtotal, and tax totals, all the normal things you would expect to find on a purchase order. You can also print or email this purchase order from Unleashed directly to your supplier. You can click on the email button. It will pop up a form which has pre-populated information, and you can send that off. Looking at the top left-hand side of the page, you can see that the purchase order has the PO prefix as well as a unique number. Next door to that number, we'll see the status of this purchase order. When we are ready, we can place the order, which means that it will be confirmed. This will change the status and produce documentation. Now that that purchase order is in Unleashed, we can easily track it. To do this, you can click on the View Purchases option from the left-hand side navigation panel. Once you're on the View Purchases screen, you'll see that we have some filters at the top of the page, so you can navigate to the exact purchase orders you're interested in. You will also notice an action cog to the right-hand side of each of those purchase orders. This will allow you to easily progress that purchase order by, for example, adding costing, receipting, and printing or emailing that purchase order. You will also see that some of the purchase orders on this page have a delivery date that's highlighted in red, and this means that those are late purchases. You are also able to see these late purchases on the dashboard view. The next step is to add purchase costs to account for freight, shipping, etc. There are a couple of ways to add the costs to a purchase order. You can click the Costs button from the purchase order itself. You can also go to the Add Purchase Costs option and then search for the purchase order. Or, like I'll do for this example, you can go to View Purchases, then use the action cog and select Costing. Under the Cost Line section, you will then be able to select the supplier who is charging us for the additional costs. You can then add the cost, select whether it's taxable or not, and then add a cost date. You can then add a reference and comments, such as what the cost is for. So for this example, let's say freight, and then you can click on Add. The cost will be distributed across the purchase order lines. By default, Unleashed allocates the costs automatically based on the amount. The least expensive items will get less freight allocated to it than our more expensive items. So, looking at our English IPA, the cheapest item we have, we are allocating just a small portion of freight. We can see the total cost that we are allocating for that line, and then the total unit cost, which is basically the purchase cost plus the freight. Now, for our most expensive item, which is the Awesome beer in my example, you can see it has more freight allocated to it. Please note that you can override the cost weighting by changing the cost total, as long as it adds up to the total cost lines. In this example, we have added on freight, but it could be any cost associated with getting the goods from your supplier to your warehouse. You can then complete the costing, which means that you have a status change from parked or placed to costed. You will then also get documentation with a breakdown. If you have made a mistake or you need to update the cost lines, you can roll back the costing at any stage to change it. The next step would be to receipt the goods that we have ordered. To do this, you can click on Receipt if you are in the purchase order. Otherwise, you can look for it using the global search, or click on Receipt Purchase or View Purchase, then use the action cog. We can see what we have purchased and the order quantity. so we need to pop in what the receipt quantity is. This is the time where we will check all the documentation and check that it's all there. Ideally, everything will be there and we can just click on receipt. However, sometimes we haven't received all the items, so we need to change the quantity. This is important to do as we do not want to overstate our stock on hand. For this example, let's say that we only received 80 bottles out of the 100 of the Indian Pale Ale. So you can go ahead and update the receipt quantity field. Let's also say that we only received 24 out of the 36 bottles of the English IPA that we ordered, so we can also update that receipt quantity field. You can see that the receipt button has now changed to a split receipt button. We can therefore split the receipt to account for what we have actually received and create a second purchase order for what we are still to receive. So for this example, I have some batch products. So let's talk a bit about batch and serial. A batch is a group of products, and you can then tell the system what the batch number is, how many units are in that batch, and what the expiry date is. A serial allows you to track every product coming into your business, and you can apply a serial number to that. So I'm going to click on the plus sign. I'll enter a batch number, B111 for this example, an expiry date for that batch, and I'll say that I have 25 products in that particular batch, and then I'm going to create the second batch number, B112, to account for the other 25 bottles. So once you've entered the batch details, you'll see that that number will become green, so you can continue with your receipting. Let's then go ahead and click on Split Receipt. This will increase the stock on hand by what we have actually received from our supplier, which is why it's so important to get this number correct. Unleashed has created a second purchase order for us. So to find this, you can go back to View Purchases, and you'll be able to see that this new purchase order has the same purchase order number as the first example, but it had a -1 appended to it. This is because it is a split off of the first purchase order that we have created. So let's go ahead and click on this new purchase order number. And here you can see all the line items that we are still owed by the supplier. Of course, it could take some time before we actually receive the goods, and once you do, you will then be able to receipt them in. You can also add freight costs to get those products here, or if it just arrives, we can go ahead and receipt it when those goods arrive. If you need to, you can split this order, and in fact, you can split it a number of times until you receive all those products. For this example, let's assume that everything has arrived, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on Receipt. And what will then happen is that our stock on hand will increase, and we can then go ahead and complete this purchase order. At this point, we have receipted our goods, but what happens if we need to return some of these products? In order to process a supplier return, you can click on the Return button from the purchase order, or go to Supplier Returns and add a supplier return. This will display a supplier return. It will list all the items that we could potentially be returning. You can either return quantity, or we could have negotiated a discount with the supplier and be returning the price. So you get to choose what you are returning, as well as the return reasons. Now these reasons are perfect for reporting purposes, and you get to set them up in your company settings to suit your business requirements. I've just put in a couple of examples here. Let's look at the return checkbox. It's very small, but it is very important to your business. You'll need to decide if you are returning the goods to the supplier. If yes, you can tick the box and the stock on hand will be reduced once the supplier return is complete. If you are going to keep the goods, then the stock levels remain as is, and then you would deselect the checkbox. For this example, I want to return the Indian Pale Ale, so I can go ahead and delete the other product, which I'm not returning. So that would be the English IPA. This is now a parked supplier return. Once I'm happy with the information, I can then complete the supplier return, and this will affect the stock on hand and the value of my stock. It will also produce some lovely documentation, and we will send a credit transaction through to your accounting software. That was a look at how you can return goods back to your supplier when needed, but let's look at how we can automate some of this. Let's look at the Reorder Report, which is a great one as it will give you an idea of your low stock items. When viewing the Reorder Report, you can make some selections on the filters at the top of the screen. This will show you a grid layout of the information that we have just requested. The report is showing us a list of products, our min and max stock levels, how much stock we have on hand, how much we have set aside for sales orders, assemblies, and how much we are expecting to come in on purchase orders, and the next delivery date. With all this taken into account, we can see the availability, which is how much is available to sell to our customers, which is basically our stock on hand minus any allocations, so what is on order and assembly. The report also shows us the suggested reorder amount, which is how much we should be purchasing to get back up to our maximum stock levels. What is quite special about this report is that you can click on the Reorder button and it will create a purchase order for you with all the low stock items. It will also use the suggested reorder amount as the quantity. So here's an example of a purchase order, and you can see that the quantity has been pulled from the suggested reorder amount column on the report. All we would now need to do is place this order and email it off to our supplier. So this really helps us keep the stock levels where they should be. Keep in mind that on the dashboard, we have the transactions section, and you can see this as a to-do list. For purchases, we can see what is in draft and what is late. We can also see the low and overstocked items. If you click on the links, it will take you directly to the relevant page in Unleashed. If you'd like to learn a bit more about purchase orders, be sure to check the intermediate video available on the Unleashed website. Let's take a look at a summary of what we've covered up till now before we proceed with the next section. The next thing we'll look at is sales. So for this video, we'll keep it quite simple as we're just covering the basics. So we'll do an example of how to create a quote, how to convert that quote into a sales order. We'll take a quick look at shipping. We'll look at credit, and then we'll mention a few reports. For this example, we will start by creating a quote. To do this, you can go to Sales on the left-hand panel, then Quotes, then Add Quote. Now do note that you don't always have to start by creating a quote. You could go straight into creating a sales order. The first thing we do when the quote is open is go ahead and select the customer that we would like to sell goods to. So for this example, I'm going to enter Ben Supplies as my customer. And again, you can search for the customer by using a customer code, customer name, or you can use the advanced search. Next, we can go ahead and put in a customer reference. We can enter a discount, select tax rates, and select the warehouse that the goods will be coming from, as well as the delivery method. Coming across, we have the delivery address. And once you select the delivery address, the rest of the address details should populate. When we place the order, Ben Supplies will get the invoice regardless of which delivery address you're sending it to. Coming across, we can then select a salesperson, which is great for calculating commission. You can also then put a sales quote date and an expiry date for this quote. There are also templates which you can design to suit your business standards. Similarly to purchase order, we then go ahead and select the products, the quantities, and the price. The price that you see here pulls through as $16, and this is coming from the wholesale tier. So in Unleashed, you can set up different prices for different customers, and these are called selling price tiers. In the system, you get to customize up to 10 of these selling price tiers. We then can see the availability, and then you can click on Add. As we add products to the quote, we can see the margins line by line as well as the overall margin and profit we're going to make at the bottom of the screen. If you need to add additional charges, such as freight, you can do that on the bottom half of the page. So for this example, I'm going to do a freight example, so I can just type in what type of charge this is and put in what that amount is going to be. And what's great about this charges function is that it will not impact your sales margin. And that really helps us make better business decisions when working with our customers. If you look on the bottom right-hand side of this page, you can also see the volume, weight, currency, totals for the product, and totals for the charges. All the information that is important to your business. All these transactions will have a prefix and a number to keep track of it. You can see this at the top of the screen. We can then save this quote as pending, and we can email and print off the documentation. Once that customer has confirmed that they'd like to go ahead with this quote, you can then click on the Accept button. Once accepted, it will be locked down as agreed by the customer. You can then go ahead and create the order by using the Create Order button. This will duplicate all the quote information and populate it in a new sales order. It will also display the quote number as a reference. You can then decide how to process the order back to the customer. You can create shipments, you can create invoices, pre- and partial payments, etc. There are many options and you have a lot of control within Unleashed. For this example, however, we're going to keep it quite simple, and I'm just going to go ahead and complete that sales order. This will then automatically ship the goods out and create an invoice. If you are integrated with an accounting package, the invoice will send through a receivable and the shipment will send over a stock journal. That should keep your accounts nice and up to date. Now, the opposite of getting in those orders is credits, and these can be added at any time. The credit can either be a free entry, or you can tie back the credit to the invoice itself, and you can do this by typing in the invoice number. The credit note will then display. You can then remove the items that are not being returned using the Delete option. You could either be crediting quantity or discount, which will be the price, and you can select reasons. Again, this is perfect for your reporting. Once again, that return checkbox is really important. The idea of Unleashed is to always have accurate stock information at all times. If you are returning the stock, then select that return checkbox, as it will affect the stock on hand and what is sent to your accounting package. Once again, we'll see the prefix, the number, and the status at the top of this page. And once you're happy with the information, you can go ahead and complete it. Please note that once you complete this credit, you will not be able to edit it because of everything that's been happening in the background. For the audit trail, you would do the reverse of the transaction. Now remember, we have those view screens that will allow you to check up on anything that has been processed in the system. These view screens also have handy filters for you to use. You can also customize the grid layout, and to do this, you can click on Show Toolbar, then select Hidden Columns, and here you'll be able to see a whole lot of fields that are not available on the grid layout by default. What you can, however, do is drag and drop some of those fields so that they appear on your grid layout, and you can also remove some of the current default columns and drag them into the Hidden Columns section. So I'll do a few examples over here. So once you've done some customizing on this grid layout, what's great is that you can save this layout and give it a unique name. You can also make this new layout the default. You can also group the grid layout. So for example, you can group by customer name. You can then also export to PDF or spreadsheets for further manipulation. Do remember that you also have the reports, which you can access from that left-hand panel, and these have been grouped into purchases, inventory, production, and sales. Let's have a look at what we've covered for sales thus far. Again, just a reminder that if you want to see more information regarding sales, to please check out our intermediate video from the Unleashed website. Thank you for viewing the Unleashed Basics training video.